The person you are on your mat right now, you can be that person all the time. Hello and welcome to the Sutra Squad podcast brought to you by One Deep Breath. My name is Seth Barron and I am so thrilled to be here today with our superstar Sutra Squad, Sally Moore.
Hello, hello.
And Sarah Page Hall.
Hello, hello, hello.
And we are, this week we're completing what I think of as like the opening trilogy, because it really tells such, like these first three verses of the Yoga Sutra tell such a beautiful story. And so we're going to get to the end of the story today in Sutra 1.3, the third sutra of the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra. And we're going to start with a quick check-in. Sarah Page, what is one word that describes how you feel right now?
Frazzled.
Fair. Sally, how about you? What is a word that describes how you feel right now?
I'm going to go with also frazzled with a touch of grateful. So a couple words.
Frazzled. Frazzled.
Perfect way to move into the awards, the holidays. I'm frazzled.
Frazzled. Frazzled.
I'm feeling, honestly, I guess I would say sparkly. I just there's a lot of just like sparkly, beautiful things and I'm very grateful for. It's been a while since I feel like I can say that's sort of like the primary mood of my life. So I'm really, really grateful for it. All right. So let's just get right into it because there's so much to talk about. I'm going to chant the sutra, and I invite you to join me for one nice Om together. And if you'd like, you could certainly just sit up nice and tall if you're in a place where you can do that, or just notice your seat. And if you'd like, you can bring your hands together in Anjali Mudra. Take a deep breath in. Let it go. And for one Om, inhale. Sutra 1.3. Tada drastu svarupe vastanam. Tada drastu svarupe vastanam. Tada drastu svarupe vastanam. All right, so this verse has 4 words. Tada drastu svarupe avasthanam. To be most specific about the pronunciation. So tada is actually like tada. That's what it means. It means then. So it's like a really easy one to think of because like literally like it's tada, like then. And now we get into some really interesting Sanskrit if you're a yoga nerd. So come along, friends. Drastu has the same root, drish, which is to see. And we certainly, many of us, if you're an asana instructor, reference drishti. And drishti is often translated as gaze or like a focal point. And every asana, every pose has a drishti. And in the lineage of yoga that is shared across Sarah, Sally, and myself, we say drishti is gaze. It's the first of the 5 pillars of Baptiste yoga. It's said, I've heard that it's been said it's like the keystone pillar. And it's a practice of pratyahara, right, of removing other sensory distraction. Don't worry, if you don't know what that word means, we'll get there along the way in the Yoga Sutra. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. And it's a practice of placing your attention with intention. It's the easiest way to say it. At least I think. And so drastu, it's like a different conjugation or a different expression of that, again, that word drish, that root, to see. And in this context, it means the seer. So it's sometimes if you see this word spelled, it's spelled S-E-E-R, like seer, which is really fascinating, by the way, because when we say seer, we like in English, that's like a fortune teller or someone who sees the future or someone who like has a strong sense of intuition to, usually it has a context or connotation of predicting something forward looking. Here it is seer, like the one who sees. So another word for this is the observer. And we, like a lot of contemplative practices, talk about cultivating the seat of the observer. So the seer, and then svarupe. Sva is like it like references the self, and it in this context, it's usually translated as like true self, capital S self, like the true nature of the self. And then avasthanam. I love this word, avasthanam. And it usually means standing, abiding, standing free. And one of our favorite books when we talk about the Sanskrit of the Yoga Sutra is Inside Patanjali's Words by Reverend Jagannath Correa. And so I'll just share a couple of insights here that I think are useful for our conversation. So drish, that root, he translates as to see, perceive, understand, visit, to see with the mind, learn, understand, notice, care for. I thought that was sweet. To see by divine intuition. So this, and then he says this, the seer is Purusha. In the sutras, Purusha is also referenced as self, capital S, owner, or Atma. So Purusha is like the counterpart of Prakriti. Prakriti is the material energy of the world. Purusha is sort of like the spiritual energy of the world. And here, Reverend Correa is suggesting that this idea of the seer, the observer, that spiritual self, is the one bearing witness. And then the word avasthanam has some really interesting root sort of components. So from ava, off, away, or down. Sthana, from stha, to stand, or to stand firmly. So in asana practice, extended mountain, urvasthasana, or samastitihi, that stha root has this, it means like to be standing in, to be grounded in. And then Master Correa says this, avasthanam, in this context, can have many shades of meaning, all appropriate to the sutra. Many translations read something like, then the seer rests or abides in its true nature. This may suggest that our essential self is fatigued or subject to change. This is not the case. What this word is indicating is that the seeker progresses on a spiritual path. Glimpses of a self that transcends all former notions of self-identity begin to emerge. In the beginning, they come and go. With continued practice, they increase in depth, breadth, and length until a direct, ever-stable experience of the self, capital S self, that is always present, always infinite, beyond space and time is realized. In other words, the experience of the self becomes stable. It rests. So the sutra is most often translated, as Master Correa says it, then the seer abides or dwells in their own true nature. So Sarah, Paige, and Sally, like, what are translations of this verse that connect connect to your heart?
First of all, you made that sound so simple, right? Oh, we just abide in ourself. We just stand in our true
It
self.
sounds simple.
It sounds so simple. Oh, okay, thanks. I'll see you next week. I'll see you next week. So I decided to look up abide, and just because it's one of those words that I think we know, we hear, we say, but what does it really mean? And I really kind of love, it says to be able to tolerate someone or something.
Ooh, to be able to tolerate. Yeah.
To tolerate the self, right? It's interesting. I have a couple of things. I love this book. It's the textbook of yoga psychology by Rasmurti Mishra. We talked about this last week about how the meaning of yoga is, chittavritti nirodha, to get rid of the fluctuations. And he brings this back. He says, the definition of yoga consists of two parts: restriction of all fluctuations and changes of mind stuff, or the chitta, attainment of unity and identity with an eternal existence, consciousness, reality, and bliss. Now, I haven't heard it referred to as bliss. So then it says, when by the practice of concentration, contemplation, and meditation, all physical and mental diseases are rooted out. So there's the answer again for all mental diseases is to sit down, get quiet, meditate. But then he goes on and he says, individual consciousness does not remain a product of time and space, but at the time of samadhi, or bliss, stands in its own real state, which is pure consciousness and pure existence. And I just love the idea of existence and using the word existence, and that's what I love so much about what we do. The other one that I like so much is the Patanjali, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I've had this since I first started practicing yoga, so it is marked up, dog-eared, breaking
You
its
love
binding.
those books that you've gone back to. My copy of the textbook of yoga psychology literally split. I have to keep it on the bookshelf because
Yes.
I've looked at and referenced it so much.
I love this, but I have a whole lot of things, and I know that we'll get into it, and I may refer back to it, but he says one thing that the reflection is distorted. However we see ourselves changes all the time because it's how we see ourselves. So it's like the mirror. I've been doing a lot of work with shadow work around mirrors and what is the reflection that I see. And he put it beautifully. The reflection is distorted because I see myself sometimes as distorted. So the seer appears distorted. When I feel good, thin, pretty, whatever, hair's on point, the reflection is good. It's not distorted. I just love that because it's so true. It's a great reminder to just sort of how we see others, how we see ourselves.
Will you read the Satchidananda? Will you read the whole translation?
Yes.
From Reverend Swami Satchidananda?
He says the seer, or the self, abides in its own nature. But what he says is, you are not the body nor the mind. You are the knower or the seer. I love that because back in the day, if you'll just indulge me this one time, because I really love this. Back in the day when I was doing costumes, we had a terrible costume designer, and I had to tape hymns on these women's costumes because they weren't hymned. And I said to one of the women who was a lead, I said, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. She goes, I'm not my costume. And I've always remembered that because I'm not what you see on the outside. There's just so much more. She's like, I'm not my costume. I've never forgotten that.
So similar, the translation I'm going to share is from The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi. And she says, united in the heart, consciousness is steadied, then we abide in our own true nature. And I
United in the heart, consciousness is steadied,
and we abide in our
own true nature.
And I also looked up the word abide. I thought, okay, 6th, 7th time looking at this sutra, and I skipped over abide. And unlike you two, I don't use that word every day. So I started digging in, and I love part of Reverend Jagannath Carrera's. The word abide means to dwell or take up permanent residence in. And I thought, how much of my life do I abide in my false nature? I really find it hard at my age to be myself regardless of what's going on around me.
Yeah, I was saying right before we started recording, I realized I'm drinking a cup of herbal tea, and I love the yogi teas. And today, and there's always a little like inspirational quote on the yogi tea, like on the little thing. And today's is, I mean, like, you can't make this up. The purpose of life is to know yourself, love yourself, trust yourself, and be yourself. So if we think about both like the context and then the individual verse, like the context, we started with Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now this is yoga. This fierce call to the urgency and immediacy and the sort of eternal and ephemeral sense of the present moment. It's always now. And the moment we reach for now, like, it escapes our grasp. We abide. We abide in the now. And then yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the restraint or the stillness of the swirl, the chitta, the vritti of our chitta, that like swirl of our own mind. So yoga is now. Yoga is when the mind is brought, or the fluctuations of the mind are brought to stillness. And the so what is that our truest self is revealed. Or it's not even that it's revealed. It's just that there's a sense of like relaxing into. We just get to be ourselves. And, it really begs the question then, like, what is this? Who is this seer? And what does it mean to just abide? And, one way to think about the seer is that every one of us has thoughts. And if you're capable of observing your thoughts, who's watching? Like, you are not your thoughts. Because in the same way, you have a body, you're capable of observing the body. So you're more than your body. You have thoughts. You're capable of observing your thoughts. So who's watching your thoughts? Who is that? You have feelings and emotions, and you're capable of observing them. Who's the observer? So this is like the big question, and the part of what's being proposed here is that this seer, like, who is the watcher, is that true self. Is the self that transcends this body, this mind. And that's why it's connected to this idea of like Atman, or the capital S self, the spiritual self, the self of Purusa. So let's just pause here for a moment and just talk about how we relate to this idea of the observer, because I think it's a really interesting construct. It comes, and it's present in a lot of contemplative and Eastern philosophies. Sally, what does it mean to you to cultivate that seat of the observer? Like, how do you relate to the seer when you start to think about what this verse means?
So I really love this time around, especially. I think last week I felt like I had a lot of opportunities to abandon the seer. And I had a really hard time coming back. And what I realized is that I need to practice giving the seer more space. The other side of that is that it's a continuation of Carrera's definition of abide. But he said, because the mind's constant fluctuations, the seer, though always present as our true identity, seems to appear and disappear. And I was like really contemplating this. And then what abide suggests, he continues, these are his words, what abide suggests is that the seer will no longer be a visitor, coming with mental stillness and leaving when the mind becomes restless. And that's when I kept thinking, and even recently I was in a yoga class and the teacher said, empty your mind. leave the crap outside. And I was just like, wow, that's not what I'm getting through.
Who is this guru who suggested that they know how to do that?
It's just, but it's also not, I think, to be honest, that kind of thing, like that's where I ran from meditation. Like that was my belief. And that kind of statement, I was like, no, my thing is, seer, you are here. Can you watch the chatter? And it was crazy to me how difficult it is for me to separate the seer from the chatter. The chatter gets louder and louder and the seer disappears. And I was like, my goal is to keep the seer present and notice the chatter. Because to be honest, I was sharing with these guys, I went to the Golden Girls play this weekend and there's a lot going on. And I was like, that's how my mind feels. And if I can remain in my seer, then it's actually, a lot of it is pretty entertaining. But when I can't remain in the seat of the seer, unentertaining, painful, messy,
Yes, right.
completely.
Yeah.
And so that's what the observer or the seer, like, wow, nothing needs to change.
Yeah.
Except for the seat I sit in. Can I sit in my seat?
Yeah. No,
In my
that's
seer seat.
Oh, Sally, I love all of
how
this.
much So that's my commitment right now, is to like slow down and practice observing.
yeah. Well, and there's something you said in there that like, and that from Reverend Carrera, that like, it's not like the seer, like like when it's like you've prepared everything for a guest and they finally arrive. And then after serving them a lovely meal, they leave. And that is not like, that's how it feels sometimes. But like the truth is that it's just always there. It's a question of our ability to sort of like peel away or find the like touch back into the stillness. And so there's something really just beautiful about that reminder that like the seer is always there. I just have to shift my I'm the one who shifts my perspective, not the outside world shifting that sort of like for me. And it really doesn't matter. Like I'm the calm in the eye of the storm.
And that the outside world a lot says, you're too much, you're not enough, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And it's like, what if we really, really came from that we are all perfectly flawed and doing our best to live this human life, and then really sat in that, you know? So that's what the observer.
It sounds so easy. Yeah.
All this stuff, so easy. And who's making it difficult?
Oh,
The
we are.
not
See
me.
me.
Yeah.
Sally, you said something that I just really, really loved. Going back to meditation, I do meditate. I teach meditation at the studio. And one of the things that I really, really like, I've also done some training around this concept. The things that do come in, the fluctuations, the chitta that come in, sometimes are there for a very good reason. Sometimes it's your subconscious coming forth saying, don't forget me. Now, if you want to calm the mind, it's really good to look at it and say, okay, I see you, but I'm going to put you aside right now because I'm trying to just breathe and be. But I'll come back to you. Thank you for coming forward because you need to be seen.
Yeah, that's what part of what I discovered. And it's so funny. My kids were teasing me, Mom, you're the only person that can find the self-help section in the children's hard book area. And I bought my kids this book and I love it. I should bring it up so we can reference it. It's called I Like Myself.
Yeah. Oh.
And it's just like, I like myself because I'm me. No matter what people say, it's not all that they see. It's not all of me. And so finally, when I was just like having a hard time getting to the seat of the seer, I was like, just use that mantra. I like myself. I like myself. Like, this is a book for 6-month-olds that, you know, it was my mantra. I was sharing with my class the other night. I was like, you know, whatever it is, I'm just like, I like myself. This is where I'm going to start. I like myself.
That is, I mean, that's so simple and so beautiful. And imagine what our world would be like if we taught that, if that's what we taught children. as a starting point, as a default for like how, right? I was at an event this past week and I saw some colleagues from a long time ago, and from a very early informative time in my career. And I lived in Chicago and I was going to Detroit for business and dealing with very conservative clients. This is like back for, there was a time, children, when people dressed up to go to offices and they wore suits and like those kinds of things were really, that was a thing. And I was this kid who had my eyebrow pierced and my tongue pierced, and I was really insecure about how I was going to be perceived. And I said to a woman who was my boss and was my mentor for a long time, like I think I shared that with her, and she just said, "You like this is who you are, and this is how you should show up. You don't need to change who you are for them." Because what really matters is like, the business, the things, you're prepared for the meeting. Like the content of the meeting has no bearing on like what you look like when you show up. And like, look, that doesn't mean show up in flip-flops, shorts, and t-shirt, right? Like there's a way still of showing up and dressing respectfully and appropriately and being yourself. And that like, there's something essential not to lose there. And I just remembered, like, it was such a powerful moment of instruction and the way I squared that circle for a long time, because I spent a lot of years doing business there with people who were, just had a much different inclination toward this. And I remember I made a conscious choice where I told myself, I'll be the best prepared. I will know the most about their business. I will do my work the best so that there's nothing they can disarm. Because I knew from their perspective, I didn't have oil in my veins, which is the term for saying you're like born into the automotive industry. I'm not local, like I'm, and as one client euphemistically once said to me, "You're so artistic."
Code.
You're so artistic, which was code for gay, queer, and I do have a creative background, like I was a, theater major, blah, blah, blah. But that's what he was really getting at. And like, you want to get up in like Silverado sales, competition, you want to talk about like where the vehicle market is moving, blah, 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 blah at the time. Like that's how I showed up, both authentically, because like I also, like I was interested in their business. But I wasn't taking out all my piercings. I was dressing appropriately, but I was also showing up as me.
You are not your piercings.
And there's a dance. Right. And I said that like, I'll prove it. Which also, if you know me in life, like that's part of how I show up. I ain't got no time for no half stepping. I don't do sort of kinda, for better or for worse. Sometimes it serves me, sometimes less so, but I'm an all-in kind of boy. And so, all in means piercings and a maniacal level of research, right? It means tattoos and, meticulous planning. It means all of it. And so like, as the observer, one thing I think that I have learned though, is the discernment of how I show up in the physical realm and how I show up in the sort of emotional and spiritual realm as well. And how, and where are those points of intersection? And it's certainly not like I'm not posing that as like an answer. I'm just saying, I'm posing it as more of like, my really deep curiosity for that point of intersection and how it shifts. It's not a single point. There's no like right answer. There's dimensions and facets of ourselves that are more appropriate in some contexts than others. And that doesn't make us inauthentic. It just references the infinite multitudes within every single one of us. And that there's always this sense of like, there's always the opportunity to like take that step back and just observe it. It's very challenging. It takes training. It takes training to cultivate that seat, because we live in a world that like conflates our body and our personage, right? One of my least favorite cultural things here in New York City that you see socially is like one of the first questions people ask, what do you do?
And why does it matter?
Right?
Why
Like,
does it
barf.
matter?
Like, who cares? What I do for money, like, is like, sure, it's something that like, but it's not in a social situation. Like, it's far from the most interesting thing, but it's just the cultural currency of New York City where like, that's like one of the first questions. So it says something about American values. As a counterpoint, I lived in France for about a month and no one in any number of casual social circumstances which I was in, I have friends there and they brought me to things with their friends. Like, no one asked me, oh, so what do you do? Like, no one. Because in French culture, it's actually sort of déclassé and a little bit rude to ask someone you just met about their career, because it's sort of like, that's like, I don't know you that way. And it's sort of like, it's just sort of like,
Well, it's code for how much money do you make? I think in a lot of ways, and then you don't discuss money.
It is.
Growing up in the South, you don't discuss money. It's rude. Full stop.
Right. And it's this way. And I think in New York, it does have this effect of like, people are trying to size each other up a little bit. Oh, you work at Goldman Sachs. Tell me more. As opposed to, oh, I'm a yoga teacher. And so like a lot of times if I'm being my sassy self, my response is I breathe. And then I sometimes I'll start with, I teach yoga, and it's really interesting to see like, because I also have a career in technology, blah, 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 blah. I'm a lot of things. It's really interesting to see how people respond when I say, for like when I was a startup executive, and like a functional, executive leader at a startup, to notice how people responded when I would say that versus when I would say, I teach yoga. Still me, different responses.
You know what, Seth, that also goes back to what you said about what happens when you can do a headstand or a handstand in the middle of the room. Nothing.
Yeah, what happens? Nothing.
And it's the same sort of psychology, really, right? We, as people, as humans in the human condition, love to put people in boxes and love to categorize them. And going back a little bit to the sutra, it affects the way I see myself. I am just a yoga teacher. So does that make me less than? How will people respond to that? Well, yeah, I am just that's all I do.
Wait, let's pause. Let's pause that for a second.
Yes, go.
Do you mean that as just like, because now because it's really interesting, like all of these words, right? Words shape our
they matter.
Perceptions. So there's a way of like, I'm just a yoga teacher that can have a contact or a connotation of minimizing, or I'm just a yoga teacher.
That's how I see it.
Which has a way of maximizing.
But if I am to talk to my family who worries about my monetary income, as families do, she's just a yoga teacher. But for me, I'm like, I am able to support myself just by teaching yoga. And that to me, I'm not flush. I'm not, rich, but I'm happy. I'm content in what it is that I do. And so the mirror that I see is happy. But the mirror that they see might be my poor sister, my poor daughter, my poor cousin. All she does is teach yoga. It's really interesting.
All she does is teach yoga.
I know. I agree.
It's so fascinating.
It's totally
really fascinating. And it's a perfect lead into, I think, the other side of this coin, which is like, if what arises from this practice is, there's other definitions that I love too, that say that the true self shines forth. And I really love that one. Like that idea of like something from within that is essential and true, like shines from within us. there's a term it's often used, and it shows up in it'll come up later on. It's effulgent. Like that, there's an effulgent light. It means like self-created and radiating. That like there's a sense of there's a light of that true self. This will come, like, put a pin in this idea because it'll show up later on in our study. So where then? So if we're cultivating the seat of the seer, the observer, what does it see? Where do you feel your most true self?
Teaching. Always. Teaching. In the yoga studio. Always. Always. I can be having the deepest, darkest mental spiral, which happens more often than I would love to say. But I'm very transparent. I am a human being who feels things very deeply. I've given up not feeling and worked too hard to feel. And I've had a rough 6 or 7 months of some things that have happened that made me really, knocked me on my heels. And I've used my friends to help me through it. I've used therapy to help me through it. And I'm on the other side of it. And I still had to teach yoga. And I had to figure out how to get in front of a class authentically without, and it never ceased to amaze me that I could go in the deepest, darkest place, and I immediately knew who I was in that moment, as long as I was teaching and I was feeling into, because I teach for the students, obviously, but it comes from me, or else it's inauthentic. It doesn't work. I always left better. The yoga, not just the asana, but the yoga got me through a very difficult time. It's where I feel my best. It's where I know I am my most authentic self. And that goes to with whom I choose to be around. I have chosen.
Association is so powerful.
Absolutely. I have not cut people out, but I love the term thus far, no further. Thank you so much for what you gave me when you gave it to me, but thus far, no further. Thank you so much. And I need to shift my vision. I need to, for me, this is who I need to be surrounding myself with. And that has to do with who, like yoga. I'm 64. I've lived a life. I'm not new here. I've had many iterations of my life, I am proud to be 64. I look really good for 64. And I'm in the best place I've ever been in my life because I've done the work. And that's what I really feel like that's what this particular sutra is about. It's not about what you see, boom. It's about how the fluctuations, how you change. I don't even resemble who I was 6, 7 months ago. I have a very different mirror right now. I see myself differently. And I like who's in the mirror. And that's going to change. That's going to change. As time goes on, I will see myself differently. And that's the beautiful part of life. It's the beautiful part of what we get to do. And that's why I love this freaking work.
Sally, where do you feel your most authentic self?
So I totally agree with teaching yoga. Like I stepped in and, I don't know, somehow I get out of my way for that because I feel like we're up to something really important for the world. But I also would say with my grandkids, and I was just thinking yesterday, my little granddaughter, baby boss, she's 2, fresh 2, really into princesses. I found someone was getting rid of a Snow White costume. She wears it everywhere now. I had to duct tape it up. Talk about, I am not my costume. I duct tape it because she's tripping. So we were my daughter coaches water polo at UC Davis, and we were watching a water polo game. So there's a ton of whistles and noises and everything. And she was twirling around in her Snow White dress, feeling really good at herself. And I'm trying to keep her a little bit away from the edge of the pool but she just came running toward me. And then she would have fallen on her face if I hadn't been present. Because there's something about these grandkids. I know I got to be present and with them. So I know to reach my arms out when my true self knows this is going down. And I thought, so these grandkids, especially the younger ones who are 2 and 9 months, like if I'm not in it, something somewhat tragic could happen. And they don't care. They don't care if I brushed my hair. They might prefer that I brush my teeth. They don't care what I'm wearing. I don't think 99% of the time, they don't even know. Once in a while, the 2-year-old goes, don't like those shoes. But so I was like, oh, she's transitioning from pure awareness to external. But, it's from them I learned so much because it doesn't feel like a choice. And then I've been considering recently, why do I consider it a choice in the rest of my life to not be the seer? And how can I use the wisdom of these tiny bitsy people? How can I allow them to teach me to just stay present? Because I don't know what I'm missing, when they're not around, because I decide to abandon the seer. So I would say that, and I totally relate to you about the teaching yoga. I could walk into the room and there's something that shifts.
There's something like I totally agree. Like, a yoga studio is such a place of refuge for me as well, whether I'm taking class or teaching class. I remember my teacher Bethany likes to say, "There's no in here, out there." It's Bethany Lyons, the singular badass yogi and owner of Lions Den Power Yoga in Chelsea, one of my teachers. And she says, like, and I remember the first time she said that, and what she means by it, when she says there's no in here, out there, is that it can be very easy. I actually had this debate with a guy I did another training with, and about like how, like, that's an artifice. That there's this like yoga Seth when I step across a threshold into a yoga studio. And then there's like not yoga Seth, right? Or there's like work Seth, or there's family Seth, as if somehow they're like totally different. And what, Bethany's proposition is to like drop that sense of, like fracture almost, or like tear down this wall. Because how you show up one place is how you show up every place. And I see this as students who, when you tell them like the person you are on your mat right now, you can be that person all the time. The person who like, because so many of us have this experience, especially as we start to develop a deeper practice, where you start like, you really love like who you are on the mat. Like, I love that I made the choice to do this for myself. I love that I put my attention on some place, just even with intention, and it's towards some sense of goodness. Hopefully, if you've got a decent teacher, or you're engaged in a practice with some, whatever practice, whether it's a meditation cushion, a yoga mat, there's a sense of like, I like who that is. I like that person who decides to do that for themselves. And then you think, yeah, but that other guy's a jerk who goes back to work. Like, what an asshole. Because we can do that to ourselves too. And so there's this like really beautiful thing when you like to just remind ourselves and each other that like, that's not somebody else. That's you. That's just like an expression of you, and you can be that person. You can always choose compassion. You can always choose to take a deep breath and find that stillness inside and feel the flow of that. It's always there. Even if you're going to talk about something material or mundane, right? I think about this a lot, like when I get triggered by my family, who I love, and thank you for listening, Mom. And there's those times where it's like, okay, Seth, like, I love this euphemism or this phrase, like, your family knows how to push your buttons because they installed them. Right? Like they installed all the buttons to push. So I think it's like, okay, like, so there's something that my mom says that just like, I'm sure she feels the same about things I say. And there's that moment of like, who do I want to be right now? And I think cultivating the observer, cultivating the witness helps. It helps because it helps us in those moments when you say, okay, wait, I know who I am. And I've seen some visions of my best self. So who do I want to be right now?
Well, and I'm going to add something on because I also feel like not all of us feel great when we're in their yoga room. Like I can be critical and mean. And so what I think a lot about the yoga room is, or the practice wherever you are, is it's almost a slightly controlled environment, right? Some of the external noise has been controlled. There's some control. And so then there's an opportunity because yes, who you are in the yoga room on the mat is who you are everywhere. So if you notice you're being really critical, or if you notice you're in some sort of comparison, or like for me, it's an easier place to notice sometimes with some of the noise. Like, so it really kind of is me and my mind and my body, like how I'm functioning together. Or I use a lot like when I assist in class and I come behind someone in chair pose, like to me, it's like, like sit down on my knees. I'm right here. You can make this way easier. And I just notice the students who don't give you any other weight. And then some that really, to me, that's a real good feedback loop. Like, do you feel like you need to go it alone? When there's someone reaching their arm out to hand, you put an assist chip like, yes, please assist me. And then I come to take some of the load off and you don't give me the load. And I see that person because I'm that person. Like, why do I have to do everything alone? And there's another discovery of, oh, am I living my whole life? Like how many arms am I not reaching out to?
The asana is life. You start in child's and you go full circle to corpse, which is Shavasana. It is life. And it's so interesting to me, Sally, to your point, watching people practice and seeing them go through their teenage years and going into, where we don't ask for help. I just wanted to throw something out and ask y'all a question because it's coming back to my mind over and over and over again. We're talking about the seer and the sutra itself. How many times have you heard the word authentic or inauthentic used like a weapon? You're so inauthentic. Who are we to judge that? We don't know if that's their authentic self in this moment. You know what I mean?
It's a really interesting question. Well, first of all, I mean, inauthenticity is one of the things that, like, for most of us is like a real, like, we have a lot of aversion to people who feel inauthentic. We have a lot of attraction toward people who feel authentic. There's this sense that, like, and I guess actually that, let me tie this, I'll tie these both together because Sally, I think you said something really important that I don't want to miss, which is that, like, every day doesn't, like, you don't have to show up as this, like, blissful, radiant, like, best self as a teacher or as a student. You just have to show up as you are. Now, let me also say, especially as a teacher, that doesn't mean you make the class about how you are. It means that you allow yourself to be influenced, you allow it to be honest, and how that informs the practice in which you're engaged when you're teaching class, which is like, how am I of service to this room of people? And it's subtle and there's sort of an art to that. But it's also very powerful. And as a student, it's really powerful to just sometimes to show up and be like, I feel like crap. I like barely want to be here, but I know it's good for me. Or my body is exhausted, or I'm so mad at myself for the thing that I just said in that meeting. And so I don't mean to imply that there's any right way to show up. I think it's important that we say that, because I think there's also this perception too of like the blissed out yogi who like is always at peace. And no, there's a way to speak to that that's authentic, and there's a way to speak to it that's inauthentic. there's a way that it lands powerfully, informed by personal experience and of service to a room of students. And there's a way of like it being about you, the instructor. And again, I'm not trying to make it about right or wrong, but I do think there's a question of like effective or ineffective. So if, as an instructor, you know, when you share from your personal experience in a way that centers you as the experience, I think that's less effective than sharing from personal experience in a way that is an invitation for students' own inquiry. It's a way of connecting, because stories are the currency we exchange that create connection. But there's a way of doing that in the studio environment that's an invitation, not just like an exposition. I will now tell you the story. I will now teach you this point of philosophy. And I as someone with some didactic tendencies, like I've probably veered into that space before. I'm constantly trying to stay in the listening of my own choices and like see that observer and really think like, you know, it's like, I don't know about you guys, like when I started teaching, I just like I had so much to give. I just wanted to say everything. and I got some very loving feedback to like speak less, say less. And it forced me to think then about where do I like, what's the outcome or what's the impact? What's the most efficient way how to drop all the extra? And sometimes we talk about like dropping the story. The story that we tell ourselves is so often like what gets in the way of our ability to just see what is. The observer is the one who starts to discern the difference. And I think that like the observer is the like in cultivating that seat as a practice. It's not as a perfect. It's not like, I mean, if you know how to do that and live in that place, like, please come and take over the podcast. Please come and teach me. And, you know, otherwise, all the rest of us are out here trying to just figure out, how do I observe who I am right now? And is that who I want to be? Sarah Page asked this question and I love it. Like, am I who I say I am? I say I want to be this person. And now I've got a moment to choose. Can that observer even just guide me for that one moment toward, this is who you say you are. And that's just the one next step toward how to live that in a more fully embodied, richer, fuller way. It's a lot. And I think it's also important to really acknowledge that there's no like fixed definition. There's no right way to navigate this. It's a really personal journey. This is where we get into the sort of like inside the very deeply, deeply personal dynamics of practice. What does it mean to be in that seat of the witness and allow the most authentic expression that you can offer right now? From the most clear-minded place of stillness we could possibly try to cultivate. And I found that not every time, I'm not always there as much as I wish I could be, but when I can get closer to that, I tend to make better decisions. I tend to be that version of myself that I like the most. So, every episode, we wrap up with some inquiry. And so this can be, you can take this however you want to take it. If you're a journal person and you want to write some stuff in your journal, these are some prompts that could be interesting for you to contemplate for the week. Or just, you know, a little like a little bone to chew on as your mind is wandering. Here's one little place that it could be interesting to chew. Sarah Page, what's an inquiry based on this sutra that you're going to be thinking about?
I'm going to be thinking about truly looking at people differently, not assuming. So where is it that you assume? Where is it that you just assume somebody is wealthy, somebody is happy, somebody is lucky, somebody is, without really getting to know the person? Seth knows this about me. Anytime I pass somebody on the street in New York, specifically where there's homelessness, I make an effort to look them in the eye and say hello. I would love for people to do that. To look at the person.
Most of the time, I think that's a great idea. There's sometimes where I say, where I steer Sarah.
Yeah, she says there. He will say, Sarah Page, do not. He will say to me, do not engage. Do not engage.
For your own safety. But no, but it's a beautiful practice, and it's yes.
So my point is, like, if you feel safe, where do you avert your eyes? There's the inquiry. Where are you averting your eyes?
Yeah, where? That's it. That's great. Love it. Yeah, Sally, what's your inquiry or string, as you say?
My string inquiry. Who do you believe you are? And do you have a practice of compassionately observing your thoughts? Do you have a recurring thought that is stopping you from showing up fully in your life? And from here, can you see, feel, or imagine the joy that resides in your true nature always? And how do you both accept yourself more fully and live more boldly?
I think my inquiry for the week is, it's funny. I just remembered I was actually on like a first date yesterday, and I said something about how teaching is part of my dharma, and he said something like, "How do you like?" You know, he sort of had heard that word. He was like, you know, and then of course I didactically explained, like, well, dharma has like a couple different contexts. Like in Hindu and yogic context, it means like path or purpose. It can also mean, like, the Buddhists would sometimes use the word dharma to describe like the full body of the teachings, right? Like as in the three jewels of Buddhism of Sangha, Dharma, Buddha. Right, connection and community, the teachings, the Dharma, like the wisdom, and then the Buddha, that there was a person who we can emulate, and that those attributes are within us. So anyway, he asked me, like, how do you know your Dharma? And I've been thinking about how I answer it, and I said, like, it's like a really good question, and I think it's like a constant journey of discovery, but like it's where you feel attunement or alignment. And that usually is way more intuitive than it is intellectual. So my inquiry would just be to like listen for where you feel like, one of the more secular ways terms that's used for this is flow state. Right? Like, where do you feel that sense of flow state where you're fully present, you're in it, you're not thinking about you're not calibrating for anybody else. You're not thinking about what I want that person to think of me. You're just you being you, doing you. Where in your life do you feel that flow state? Where in your life do you feel that sense of just like a totally like uninhibited, authentic expression? As something Sally said too, that I'll say, if you've got kids around you in your life, like they are such amazing teachers for this, because little children haven't had all of the conditioning yet to show up in the way they think they're supposed to. They just like watch, like, especially when children play and when they play pretend, they like their pretend is often like so much more authentic than so many adults that I've seen and met in my life. So that's the inquiry, is like, where do you feel flow? And just like let's just trust that. Where do you feel flow? And if you want to keep going, then, what are the conditions in which that occurs? So that you can then start to notice that those conditions can exist in maybe other contexts and other places, and bring that into as much of your life as you can, and see what happens. All right. And we also offer a teaching tip. As we've talked about, like all three of us are asana and like yoga teachers, and everybody, Sally says, the best teacher is the one on your mat. So whether you're giving class or taking class or just living an interesting life, like, welcome, you're a yoga student. So what's a teaching tip, Sally, that you're gonna think about bringing into class this week?
So I'm gonna go with drishti, like just using what you physically see to keep you grounded in the present moment, but also becoming aware of where you're putting your attention. Like, are you distorting what you're seeing based on a past experience? Can you keep moving your attention onto what you want and then just be for that?
SP? Sarah Page?
For me, it goes along with where do you avert your eyes? So where is the student that you don't want to give attention to and give attention to that student? Just sort of the mirror aspect of it, the seer. Why is it that student?
Isn't that fascinating when a student like triggers you a little bit? And then there's that question of like, and there's this really fine line. And this is the art of teaching yoga, right? Where it's like, okay, you give a cue and you see the student who's just like not doing it. And it's so easy to get to like, you're not listening to me. And
where else does that show up in your life?
I have to interrupt that. But like, I have to get real curious and stop myself and say like, wait a minute, Seth, like, am I trying to land something in the student's body for me or for them? Is that about my ego if I want to be listened to, followed? Yeah, I love it. It's so good.
That's the teaching tip is why is that, because we got to look clearly in the mirror. So go to that student with love and maybe offer an assist or offer some eye contact or, a friend of mine says, and then I'll shut up, but I love this. What do you want to go for as Halloween? And he said, eye contact. It's the scariest thing. Eye contact is the scariest thing. And I thought that's so true. Notice where you avert your eyes. Notice that student, go to that student, make some eye contact.
Yeah. And sometimes presence is just so powerful, right? Like if I see a student who's really struggling to just like move with breath, sometimes instead of like giving a cue or anything else, like I use my body a lot as a teacher. And so like, if there's room in the class, I'll just like, and where it's like, if like, I'll just take the pose with them and breathe. And I'll try to do it in the side that they can see me. And I'm just saying, I'm right here with you. We're doing it together, right? It's all good. Or like, so another one that I'll lean down and just be like, are you modifying that for a reason? Like, I'm giving a cue, like this, I see this all the time at the gym. It's, upward facing dog with that the students are keeping their toes tucked, as opposed to untucking their toes and pressing into the tops of their feet so they can lift their thighs and lengthen the lumbar. Anyway, and I'll sometimes ask because part of it is like the fascinating thing of like, do you even realize what you're doing? Like, again, like deep yogis build a pretty, most anyway, like part of that practice is building a sense of like your proprioception and interoception of like knowing where your body is in space. And I have to remind myself that like, that is something I've trained. So like, yeah, I know where my feet are. A lot of people don't know where their feet are. A lot of people have no idea where their feet are. And so it's wonderful. Like I can invite you into that moment of discovery versus making you wrong for not taking my cue. So it's a good listening. All right, my loves. I feel so enlivened. I feel like this allows this space that we're carving out here for this study and to be together is like a real sense of my Svarupe Vastanam, of my like where that, because I feel there's like a vastness of how we get to take on this work together. And it feels so just, I think you those of you listening at home know, like, this is a real labor of love. Like, we're not monetizing this podcast yet. We're not looking to do this to recoup our expenses even, although like, hope maybe, give me a shout and let me know if you're interested. Seth@onedeepbreath.com. but
SeerPageHallYoga.com.
There it is. So yeah, like, it's a place to be our true selves. And for every single one of you who listens or is hearing the sound of our voices, thank you. Truly. Please consider and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Leave us a comment. Share it with somebody. If you derived any benefit from this, if anything sparked something interesting for you and you've got a friend who you think could use, some good spiritual content in their feed, send it along. We'll be terribly grateful. And we will be back with you next week to continue our study. For now, thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Page.
Thank you. I love our sandbox. Love it.
And thank to you, to every single one of you. That's it for this episode of Sutra Squad. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.